Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Matt from Matt's Bookshelf, and today I'm talking about a topic on booktube that is both very popular and often not discussed enough in depth, and that is book buying. Just as a little background, as you can probably tell from my last bookshelf tour, I don't really own that many books, at least relative to the average booktuber, and I kind of want to go a little more into that as to why my bookshelf is relatively small compared to other booktubers, and why I plan on keeping it that way. So full disclosure, my bookshelf has gotten a lot larger ever since getting onto booktube. I become more excited about reading a larger genre of books, a larger variety of books I should say, because of booktube and because of meeting people on booktube who have different tastes than I do, and I'm very happy with the collection that I have, and this is not meant to be a way of preaching my own philosophies on buying books, more just me sharing my opinion, which I think is a little more distinct from the average booktuber. This is not meant to be a philosophical diatribe on the illusion of ownership, if you will, even though that does play somewhat of a role in why I don't buy as many books as a lot of other people, but it's more just me sharing my philosophies on reading and buying books. Last year I made a book haul video called A Very Realistic Book Haul, and it's supposed to be sort of like a play on the typical book haul video where it's I bought 100 books, I bought 120 books, I bought 200 books. Me and my book haul videos, I typically buy 5, and usually the book haul videos you see are the only book shopping that I do. And a large part of that is because I do not like creating a large reading list for myself. I do have a large TBR, and I do have a lot of books on my bookshelf I haven't gotten around to reading yet. But to me, the ownership of books that I haven't read sort of creates this chain for me, and I'll go more into that. Like most other readers, I am perpetually excited by reading different genres, reading different authors that I have yet to explore or discover. But I also feel like that aspiration and that drive can also lead to bad things, and that's partially why I think showing restraint on buying books is ultimately helpful in you restraining and focusing in on that ambition and that drive. For example, when I went to do my James Joyce series, all I bought was James Joyce books. So when I came home and all I could read was James Joyce, it encouraged me to continue with the series, to continue reading James Joyce's works, and I had no other distractions I could possibly go for. Whereas if I had bought James Joyce books and then continued my search to other authors and to other genres that I had not discovered, and then continued to buy more books, those books would all stack up, and then suddenly the James Joyce works become a lot smaller in the grand scheme of all the books that I have. So buying a smaller amount of books allowed me to focus more on my reading objectives, so that I can safely say I read every James Joyce work from Dubliners to Ulysses without any distractions, without any in reading it in a fairly quick period of time relative to the length of the works, because I didn't have other distractions to read. And when you have a smaller amount of books, for me, it narrows in my focus on what I'm going to read, and it generates hype for the books that I own and not the books that I want to own. And that's another reason as to why I do not buy that many books. It's because I want to be excited for the books that I own, even though I do often do research into other genres and other books that I want to read. I think that buying a large amount of books makes those books that I want to read currently much smaller and much less appealing, because it can be overwhelming to have a larger amount of books for me. For example, I have the Iliad right now, which I'll probably be reading after I'm done reading the Recognitions by William Gaddis. But, if I'd bought a ton of different ancient Greek books and a ton of different ancient classic books in general, the Iliad would look a lot less appealing because I have a larger variety of books. But now, because I haven't read the Iliad, when I'm finished with the Recognitions, I won't have any other choice but to go to the Iliad after this point. And speaking of Recognitions, that book is 900-something pages long, and as it stands right now, I'm only like 300 pages into it. I also can't really justify buying more books now because I look at things through like a macro lens with regards to my time. So, for example, I'm reading the Recognitions, and I don't think I'll be done with it for at least a month, maybe, depending on how engaged I am with the book. So, and I already have a relatively large back haul of books that I own that I haven't read, which are also sizable books. Like I have Wolf Hall, Gravity's Rainbow, the Iliad, which I just mentioned, but that's potentially months and months of reading right there. And the more books I buy, the more amount of time it's going to take for me to read all those books. But I think that if I keep those lists smaller, then the goal of reading all the books that I own becomes much more achievable. And that's kind of how I'm feeling now. Like, do I really want a year's worth of reading backlogged on my bookshelf, or because again, ambition is a weird thing. One day I could be really engaged with the Western genre. If I want to watch a Western novels, like, I impetuously go on a book haul where I buy 20 different Western books, and then a few months later, when I'm finally done with the books that I'm reading and can move on to the Westerns, will I still be engaged? Will I still be enthusiastic about reading the Western books after that? Whereas if I read all the books that I own, and then I say, what am I interested in right now? And then I can just buy the books and read them as soon as I get them, because I don't have a backlist of books to read. I can hit those ambitions when they occur and not kind of regret buying a bunch of books I don't really care about because I bought them 6 months ago and I'm finally getting around to read them because of my other backlist of books I haven't read. And now I don't really care about these books, so I'm just going to skip over them. But I'll still own them, but they'll just kind of be wasting away on my bookshelf. And going back to the chain metaphor, which I mentioned earlier, on a more philosophical note, I don't plan on being here forever. I live in the U.S., but I would like to live in Europe at some point in my life. And when I think about, do I really want the chain of having all these books around for me to have to worry about and potentially bring with me wherever I go? Especially if a large amount of the books are books that I have not read and don't particularly have an attachment towards. I don't really want that. And again, people are in different life scenarios. People might want to live in the same place that they are right now for the rest of their lives, conceivably. So it makes sense for them to have a larger bookshelf because moving is not really on their table. For me, I don't really know where I want to live with my life. I would like to live in multiple different places at some point, but having a large bookshelf wouldn't really be practical with that kind of lifestyle for me. And yeah, it's just a more personal thing for me, but that's another huge component as to why I'm a bit more frugal with buying books. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm sorry this one came off a bit rambly. This is not meant to be a preachy video. This is just me talking about my own thoughts. And I also have to say, I don't think I'm a particularly fast reader, especially compared to the average person who, reads a lot. I think I'm relatively slow compared to that person. And so it wouldn't make sense for me to not buy books very often because it takes me a little while to finish the books that I'm reading, whereas a lot of other people can just speed through books and then buy books, so you're getting like a high return value on what you're buying. Whereas me, I have a couple books that I bought a year ago, which I still haven't gotten to, and that's partially because I'm not excited for them anymore because the time passed where I wanted to read them, and I've bought more books since then that I'm more interested in reading. And so yeah, what do you do with that? But thank you very much. Check out my friends Dronzo and Colorado's Wonderland, and check out my other videos if you will. Check out my bookshelf video if you want a very underwhelming bookshelf tour of my stuff. And hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Quick mention, I recently made a newsletter, which will be in the link in the description below of this video, where I plan on, one, writing about books that I have read that I don't do videos on, and keep you updated on like what I've been reading and what I might be reading next. And also, as I mentioned on other videos, I've written a book and I plan on self-publishing it this summer. I'll do another video more in-depth on that coming soon, but that'll also be a platform for me to help market the book and to keep people updated on how I'm making progress with getting it published if you're interested in that. But it'll be a mix of both what I'm reading and on the book. So it's a pretty big variety of different stuff if you're interested, and I hope that you check it out if you want to. So thank you and goodbye.